sold for a dairy cow at 18. The mountain man who saved her became her everything. Part 1, the rope burned into her wrists as her father shoved her forward onto the wooden platform. Emma's bare feet scraped against the splintered boards while a crowd of rough men gathered below, their eyes scanning her like she was livestock. She was 18 years old, and her father was selling her for a dairy cow. "She's strong, can work dawn to dusk," her father shouted, his voice slurred from whiskey. "Good with cooking and mending? Worth more than gold, but I'll take a cow and $20. Emma's heart hammered against her ribs. This couldn't be happening. Not in 1887, not in Colorado territory, but her father had gambled away everything they owned, and now she was the last thing of value. Her mother had died 2 winters ago, and without her protection, Emma had become nothing more than property. A man with yellow teeth stepped forward, coins jingling in his palm. "I'll give you 15 and a sow." "20 or no deal," her father barked back. Emma's legs trembled. She wanted to run, to scream, to fight, but the rope held tight and her father's gun pressed against his hip was a clear warning. She'd seen him use it on a horse that went lame. He wouldn't hesitate to use it on her. The bidding continued. Men called out offers like she was a mule at auction. Her stomach twisted with each new voice. Then the crowd went silent. Emma lifted her head and saw why. A man stood at the edge of the gathering, tall and broad-shouldered, with dark hair that touched his collar. His face was weathered from mountain living, with a scar cutting through his left eyebrow. He wore buckskin and fur, and a hunting knife hung from his belt. Everything about him screamed danger. "I'll give you the cow, $50, and a warning," the mountain man said, his voice low and steady. "Take the deal and leave town before sundown. Stay, and you'll regret it." Her father's face went pale. Everyone in 3 counties knew about the mountain men who lived in the high peaks. They were legends, ghosts, men who survived where others died. They followed their own laws and answered to no one. "Sold," her father stammered, snatching the money and a rope tied to a brown dairy cow. He didn't even look at Emma as he hurried away through the crowd. The mountain man walked up to the platform and cut the rope from Emma's wrists with one swift motion. His hands were rough but gentle. "Can you ride?" Emma nodded, not trusting her voice.
"Good. We have a long way to go before dark."
He led her to a massive bay horse that stood waiting near the tree line. Without ceremony, he lifted her onto the saddle and swung up behind her. His arm came around her waist, steady and protective, and the horse launched into a gallop. They rode hard toward the mountains, leaving the town and her old life behind in a cloud of dust. Part 2. The horse climbed steadily into the high country as the sun began its descent toward the jagged peaks. Emma sat rigid in the saddle, acutely aware of the stranger's arm around her waist and the warmth of his chest against her back. She didn't know his name, didn't know where he was taking her, didn't know what he expected in return for the $50 and a cow he'd paid for her. "Name's Jack," he said, as if reading her thoughts. "Jack Morrison. My cabin's another 2 hours north." Emma swallowed hard. "I'm Emma. Emma Carter." "I know. I've seen you in town before." This surprised her. She'd never noticed him, but then again, mountain men didn't come to town often. They traded furs once or twice a year and disappeared back into the wilderness. "Why did you buy me?" The question came out before she could stop it. Jack was quiet for a moment. "Because no woman deserves to be sold like cattle, and because I could." It wasn't the answer she expected. Emma had braced herself for something darker, some confession of loneliness or need that would explain why mountain men would spend so much money on a girl he didn't know. But his answer was simple, almost casual, like he'd done nothing more remarkable than stop a runaway horse. They rode through pine forests that smelled of sap and earth. Squirrels chattered warnings as they passed. A hawk circled overhead, riding the thermals. The air grew thinner and colder as they climbed, and Emma shivered in her threadbare dress. Jack noticed immediately. He reined the horse to a stop, shrugged out of his fur-lined coat, and draped it around her shoulders. It was heavy and warm and smelled like wood smoke and leather. "Thank you," Emma whispered. He simply nodded and urged the horse forward again. As twilight painted the sky purple and gold, they emerged into a clearing. A log cabin stood against the mountainside, sturdy and well-built, with smoke curling from the stone chimney. A small barn sat nearby, and Emma could see goats in a pen. A garden plot, now dormant for winter, stretched along the south side of the cabin. Everything spoke of careful planning and hard work. Jack dismounted and reached up to help Emma down. Her legs nearly buckled when her feet hit the ground. They'd been riding for hours, and her body ached from tension and fear. Barn first, Jack said, leading the horse towards the structure. Then food. Emma followed, unsure what else to do. Inside the barn, she watched as Jack unsaddled the horse with practiced efficiency. He rubbed the animal down, checked its hooves, and gave it grain and fresh water. The care he showed the horse eased something tight in Emma's chest. A man who treated animals well was less likely to be cruel. When he finished, Jack gestured toward the cabin. "Come on. You must be starving." The inside of the cabin was surprisingly comfortable. A large fireplace dominated one wall with a black pot hanging over the flames. Shelves lined with supplies covered another wall. A solid wooden table and 2 chairs sat in the center, and Emma could see a bed in the corner, neatly made with thick wool blankets. A ladder led to a loft above. Jack stirred the pot over the fire, and the smell of venison stew filled the cabin. Emma's stomach growled loudly. "Sit," Jack said, nodding toward the table. She obeyed, her hands folded in her lap. Jack ladled stew into 2 wooden bowls and set one in front of her along with a chunk of bread. Then he sat across from her and began to eat. Emma stared at the food. It had been 2 days since she'd eaten anything substantial. Her father had stopped feeding her properly once he decided to sell her, saying she'd be someone else's problem soon enough. But years of caution held her back. "It's not poisoned," Jack said without looking up. "And you're not a prisoner. Eat." Emma picked up the spoon and tasted the stew. It was rich and hearty, the best thing she'd eaten in months. She forced herself to eat slowly, even though she wanted to devour it all at once. They ate in silence. When Emma finished, Jack refilled her bowl without comment. She ate the second helping more slowly, savoring each bite. After dinner, Jack cleared the dishes and set a kettle of water to heat. "You'll sleep in the loft," he said. "There's blankets up there and a mattress stuffed with pine needles. It's comfortable enough." Emma looked at the ladder, then back at Jack. "Where will you sleep?" "Down here." "Like always." "But this is your cabin, your bed." Jack shook his head. "You've been through enough today. You need rest and privacy. I'll sleep by the fire. Done it plenty of times before." Emma didn't know what to say. Everything about this situation was strange. She'd expected demands, expectations, some claim on her in exchange for the money he'd spent, but Jack treated her like a guest, not property. "I should tell you something," Jack said, pouring hot water into a basin. "Come spring, I'll take you wherever you want to go. Could be another town, could be family if you have any, could be a wagon train heading west. Your choice. Until then, winter's coming hard and these mountains aren't safe for traveling. You'll stay here, help with chores, and we'll make do. But you're not a servant, and you're not a wife. You're just a person who needs help. Understood?" Emma felt tears burn her eyes. She blinked them back. "Why are you being kind to me?" Jack finally looked directly at her, and Emma saw something in his eyes that made her breath catch. Pain, old and deep, carefully hidden beneath layers of self-reliance. "Because someone was kind to me once, when I needed it most," he said quietly. "Now wash up and get some sleep. Morning comes early in the mountains." He handed her the basin of warm water and a clean cloth, then turned his back to give her privacy. Emma washed quickly, scrubbing away the dust and shame of the day. When she finished, she climbed the ladder to the loft. The space was small but cozy, with a thick mattress and heavy blankets. A small window looked out over the moonlit mountains. Emma wrapped herself in the blankets and lay down, exhaustion finally overwhelming her fear. Below, she could hear Jack banking the fire and settling in for the night. For the first time in months, Emma felt safe. She didn't understand it, didn't fully trust it, but she felt it nonetheless. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. But tonight, she was warm, fed, and protected. That was enough. Part 3, Emma woke to the sound of an axe splitting wood. Pale morning light filtered through the loft window, and she could smell coffee brewing. For a moment, she forgot where she was. Then memory crashed back, yesterday's events flooding her mind like ice water. She sat up quickly, her heart racing. Below, the cabin was empty except for the coffee pot on the fire. She climbed down the ladder, her muscles protesting every movement. Through the window, she saw Jack outside, his back to the cabin as he worked through a pile of logs with steady, powerful swings. Emma poured herself coffee in a tin cup and stood by the fire, warm in her hands. She had no idea what to do with herself. No instructions, no orders, no demands. The freedom felt almost as frightening as the auction block had been. The door opened and Jack entered, carrying an armload of split wood. He stacked it neatly by the fireplace, then poured his own coffee. "There's cornmeal in the barrel," he said. "Dried berries in the jar on the shelf. You can make breakfast if you want, or I can do it." "I'll do it," Emma said quickly. At least this was familiar territory. She knew how to cook, how to be useful. She made cornmeal porridge with dried blueberries and a touch of honey. Jack ate without comment, but she noticed he had 2 bowls. When they finished, he stood and grabbed his rifle from above the door. I need to check my trap lines today. There's a storm coming tomorrow, maybe the day after. Need to get everything secured before it hits. You can come with me or stay here. Your choice. Emma thought about staying alone in the cabin, safe and warm. Then she thought about sitting idle all day. Nothing but her thoughts for company. I'll come, she said. Jack nodded and handed her a heavy wool coat from a peg by the door. It was too big for her, but it was warm. He also gave her a pair of boots, lined with fur. They fit better than she expected. They set out into the morning cold. The sky was a brilliant blue, but Emma could see dark clouds gathering on the western horizon. Jack moved through the forest with the confidence of someone who knew every tree and stone. Emma struggled to keep up, her town legs unused to the rough terrain. Jack's trap line stretched for miles, winding through valleys and across streams. At each trap he worked with quick efficiency. Some held rabbits or squirrels. One had caught a beaver. Jack reset each trap carefully, explaining the process as he worked. You place them where the animals travel naturally, he said. Near water, along game trails. You read the land, learn its rhythms.
The mountain provides if you respect it.
Emma listened, absorbing everything. She'd lived her whole life in town, never learning these skills. Her mother had taught her cooking and sewing, but nothing about survival in the wild. At the 8th trap, they found trouble. The trap was sprung but empty, and the ground around it was torn up. Large paw prints marked the dirt. Bear, Jack said, his voice tense. Big one. Took my catch. Emma felt a chill that had nothing to do with the cold. Is it dangerous? All bears are dangerous, but this one's bold. It's not afraid of my traps or my scent. That's a problem. Jack studied the tracks carefully. Looks like it headed north, away from the cabin. We'll keep moving, but stay close. They continued the trap line, but Jack kept his rifle ready now. Emma found herself watching the trees, jumping at every sound. The forest that had seemed peaceful an hour ago now felt full of hidden threats. They were checking the last trap when Emma heard it, a deep guttural growl that rumbled through the trees like thunder. She froze, her blood turning to ice. Jack grabbed her arm and pulled her behind him in one smooth motion. 50 yards away, a massive brown bear stood on its hind legs, testing the air. It was enormous, easily 7 feet tall, with fur that rippled over powerful muscles. Don't run, Jack whispered. Don't make any sudden moves. The bear dropped to all fours and took a step toward them, then another. Jack raised his rifle, aiming carefully, but Emma could see the tension in his shoulders. One shot might not be enough to stop a charging bear, especially at this distance. When I fire, you run for that pine tree, Jack said, his voice barely audible. The one with the low branches. Climb as high as you can. What about you?
On 3.
2. The bear charged before Jack reached 3. It moved with terrifying speed, closing the distance in massive bounds.
Jack fired, the rifle crack echoing off the mountains.
The bear stumbled but kept coming. Run, Jack shouted. Emma ran. Her legs pumped, her lungs burned, branches tore at her face and clothes. Behind her she heard Jack fire again, then the roar of the bear. She reached the pine tree and grabbed the lowest branch, hauling herself up with strength born of pure terror. She climbed frantically, higher and higher, until she was 15 feet off the ground. Only then did she look down. Jack was backing toward the tree, rifle raised for a third shot. The bear had slowed, blood staining its shoulder, but it was still coming. Jack fired. The bear roared and swatted at the air, then suddenly turned and crashed away through the undergrowth. Jack stood perfectly still, rifle ready, watching the direction the bear had gone. Minutes passed. Finally, he lowered the weapon and looked up at Emma. You can come down now. It's gone. Emma's hands shook so badly she could barely grip the branches. Jack guided her down, catching her when her foot slipped. Once on the ground, her legs gave out completely. She collapsed against a tree trunk, gasping for air. Jack knelt beside her, checking her for injuries. Are you hurt? Emma shook her head, unable to speak. You did good, Jack said. You didn't panic, didn't scream, didn't freeze. That saved both our lives. Emma finally found her voice. You could have died, but I didn't, and neither did you. Jack helped her to her feet. Come on, we need to get back to the cabin. That bear is wounded and angry. It won't come back today, but we need to be careful. They made their way back through the forest, Jack alert and watchful. Emma's legs felt like water, but she kept moving. When they finally saw the cabin, she nearly cried with relief. Inside, Jack made her sit by the fire while he heated water for tea. He added something from a flask, and when Emma drank it, she tasted whiskey. It burned going down, but it steadied her nerves. "I'm sorry," Jack said, sitting across from her. "I shouldn't have brought you with me. That was my mistake. You couldn't have known the bear would be there. I should have known. I've been hunting these mountains for 5 years. I got careless." Jack ran a hand through his hair. "You could have been killed because of my carelessness." Emma set down her cup and looked at him directly. "You saved my life yesterday when you bought me from my father. You've given me food and shelter and asked nothing in return. Today you put yourself between me and a bear. I think you've more than made up for any carelessness." Jack met her eyes and something passed between them. Understanding, maybe. Or the beginning of trust. "The storm will be here by tomorrow evening," Jack said, breaking the moment. "We'll need to bring in extra wood, check the barn, make sure we have enough food. Once the snow starts, we could be trapped here for days, maybe a week. Tell me what to do and I'll do it," Emma said. They spent the rest of the day preparing. Emma hauled wood while Jack reinforced the barn and checked the goats. She helped him bring in buckets of water from the stream and organize supplies. By evening, they were both exhausted. Emma made dinner, a simple stew with dried vegetables and salt pork. They ate together, more comfortable with each other now. The bear attack had forged something between them, a bond built on survival. As Emma climbed to the loft that night, she realized she hadn't thought about her father all day. Hadn't thought about the auction, or the shame, or the fear. She'd been too busy living, surviving, being useful. For the first time in her life, Emma felt like she mattered. Not as property or a burden, but as a person with value beyond what she could be sold for. It was a strange feeling, but not an unwelcome one. Part 4, the storm hit with savage fury. The snow fell so thick Emma couldn't see the barn from the cabin window. Wind howled around the walls like a living thing, and the temperature plummeted until frost formed on the inside of the windows. For 3 days they were trapped inside, the world beyond reduced to white chaos. Emma discovered that being confined with Jack Morrison was not the ordeal she'd feared. He was quiet but not cold, reserved but not cruel. He spent his time mending equipment, carving intricate designs into leather, and reading from a small collection of books he kept wrapped in oilcloth. "Where did you learn to read?" Emma asked on the second day, watching him turn pages in a worn copy of Shakespeare. "My mother taught me before she died," Jack said. "I was 12 when the fever took her. My father lasted another 2 years, then his heart gave out. I've been on my own since I was 14.
Emma processed this.
You were younger than me when you lost everything. Different circumstances, maybe, but yes. I know what it's like to have nothing." Jack closed the book. "That's why I couldn't leave you on that auction block. I've seen too much suffering to ignore it when I can help."
On the third day, Emma woke to silence. The wind had died.
She climbed down from the loft and found Jack already awake, staring out the window at a transformed world. Snow had buried everything under 3 feet of powder. The sky was clear now, brilliant blue against blinding white. "We need to check the animals," Jack said. "Then dig out paths to the barn and the wood pile." It took them most of the morning. The goats were fine, huddled together for warmth but healthy. The chickens Emma hadn't known existed were tucked in their coop, still laying eggs despite the cold. They worked together, shoveling paths, hauling water that kept trying to freeze in the buckets. By afternoon, Emma was exhausted but satisfied. She'd worked harder in the past 3 days than she ever had in town. But here, it felt different. Every task had meaning, every effort had visible results. She was building something, maintaining something, rather than just surviving day to day under her father's thumb. That evening, as they sat by the fire, Jack spoke more than he had in days. "I came to these mountains 5 years ago with nothing but my father's rifle and a determination to disappear," he said. "Built this cabin with my own hands, one log at a time. Learned to hunt and trap through trial and error. Lost 2 toes to frostbite the first winter because I didn't know better. Nearly starved the second winter when the game moved to lower elevations." He paused, staring into the flames. "There were days I thought about giving up, heading back to civilization, but then I'd remember why I left in the first place." "Why did you leave?" Emma asked softly. Jack was quiet for so long she thought he wouldn't answer. Then he said, "I was engaged once. Her name was Caroline. We were going to be married in the spring, but her father had debts, gambling debts, and the men he owed came collecting. They took Caroline instead of money, said they'd sell her to cover what was owed. I tried to stop them, tried to fight to save her." He touched the scar on his eyebrow. They beat me unconscious and left me in the street. When I woke up, she was gone. I searched for months, but I never found her. Eventually, I had to accept she was dead or worse. Emma's heart clenched. Now she understood the pain she'd seen in his eyes that first night. I'm sorry. Don't be. It was a lifetime ago. Jack looked at her. But that's why I couldn't walk past you at that auction. Couldn't let history repeat itself when I had the power to stop it. Caroline is gone, but you're here. That has to mean something. Emma moved closer to the fire, processing his words. When spring comes and you take me to town, what will you do? Come back here. This is my home now. Will you be lonely? Jack considered this. I've been alone for 5 years. I'm used to it. That's not the same as being happy, Emma said carefully. Happiness is overrated. Safety and survival, those are what matter. Emma disagreed but didn't argue. She was beginning to understand that Jack had built walls around himself as surely as he'd built this cabin. The mountains were his refuge, but also his prison. The next morning brought a new challenge. Emma was gathering eggs when she heard frantic bleating from the goat pen. She ran outside to find one of the goats on the ground, its side heaving, clearly in distress. Jack, she called. He appeared instantly, took one look at the goat, and swore under his breath. She's giving birth. Too early. The stress from the storm must have triggered labor. Emma watched, feeling helpless, as Jack examined the goat. His hands were gentle but firm, checking for the position of the kid. His face grew grim. It's breech. The kid's coming backward. If I don't turn it, both of them will die. For the next hour, Emma followed Jack's instructions precisely. She held the goat steady while Jack worked to turn the kid inside its mother. The goat screamed and thrashed. Blood stained the snow. Emma wanted to look away, but forced herself to keep watching, keep helping. Finally, Jack managed to turn the kid. Minutes later, it emerged in a rush of fluid and blood. Jack cleared its nose and mouth, rubbing vigorously. The kid didn't move, didn't breathe. Jack didn't give up. He kept rubbing, kept working, breathing gently into the kid's nose. Emma held her breath, praying to a god she wasn't sure she believed in anymore. Then the kid coughed, gasped, bleated weakly. The mother goat lifted her head and began licking her baby, making soft sounds of encouragement. The kid struggled to its feet, wobbly but alive. Emma realized she was crying. Jack sat back in the snow, exhausted, covered in blood and birth fluids, but he was smiling. You saved them, Emma said. We saved them, Jack corrected. I couldn't have done it alone. They cleaned up in silence, both sobered by how close they'd come to loss. Inside the cabin, Emma heated water while Jack scrubbed his hands and arms. She made strong coffee and they sat together, watching through the window as the mother goat nursed her kid. Life is hard up here, Jack said. Harder than in town. Animals die. People die. The mountains don't care about fair or easy. They just are. But it's honest, Emma replied. In town, my father pretended to care about me while planning to sell me. Here, when there's danger, you see it coming. When there's work to do, you do it. When something lives or dies, it's real. I prefer honest hardship to comfortable lies. Jack looked at her with something like surprise. You've changed since that first day. I'm becoming who I was supposed to be before my father broke me down. Emma met his gaze steadily. And you're not as alone as you think you are. Jack didn't respond, but something shifted in his expression. The walls he'd built so carefully showed the smallest crack. That night, a wolf pack howled in the distance. The sound was wild and beautiful and somehow fitting. Emma lay in her loft, listening, and realized she was no longer afraid of the mountains. The dangers were real, but so was the freedom. Here she was learning to be strong in ways she'd never imagined. Below, she heard Jack moving around the cabin, banking the fire for the night. She wondered if he was thinking about Caroline, about the life he'd lost, and the life he'd chosen instead. She wondered if he ever thought about the future rather than just surviving the present. She wondered if, when spring came, she'd really want to leave. Part 5. 3 weeks passed. The snow melted in patches, revealing brown earth and the first hints of green. Emma and Jack fell into a routine that felt almost comfortable. She cooked and managed the cabin while he hunted and maintained the property. They ate meals together, worked side by side, and in the evenings, Jack taught her to read better than her mother's basic lessons had done. But there was tension beneath the surface, unspoken questions hanging between them like morning mist. Spring was coming. Decisions would need to be made. The situation came to a head on a bright March morning. Emma was hanging laundry when she heard horses. Jack appeared from the barn, rifle in hand, his face set in hard lines. 3 men rode into the clearing, and Emma's blood turned to ice when she recognized the one in front, her father. "There she is," he called out, pointing at Emma. "That's my daughter. This man kidnapped her." The 2 men with him wore deputy badges. One of them addressed Jack. "Sir, we need to ask you some questions about how you came to have this young woman in your possession." Jack's knuckles were white on the rifle, but his voice stayed calm. "I bought her at a legal auction in town, paid $50 in a dairy cow to her father, who was selling her to settle his gambling debts. There were 30 witnesses. That's a lie," her father sputtered. "I was tricked, drunk, the transaction wasn't legal. She's my daughter and she belongs with me." Emma found her voice. "I'm 18 years old. I don't belong to anyone." Her father's face turned purple. "You ungrateful witch. After everything I've done for you, feeding you and housing you all these years, and this is how you repay me? By running off with some savage mountain man?" "You sold me," Emma said, her voice shaking but clear. "You put me on an auction block and sold me like livestock. I owe you nothing." One of the deputies, a younger man with kind eyes, looked uncomfortable. "Miss, did this man harm you in any way? Force you to stay here against your will?" "No," Emma said firmly. "Jack saved me. He's given me shelter and asked nothing in return. He's treated me with more respect than my father ever did." "She's been poisoned against me," her father whined. "He's got her under some kind of spell. You need to bring her back to town where she belongs." The older deputy sighed. "The law's fuzzy on this, Miss Carter. You're of age, so you can make your own decisions. But your father's claiming the sale wasn't legitimate, which means technically you might still be his responsibility." "I'll never go back with him," Emma said. "I'd rather die." "Dramatic little thing, isn't she?" her father sneered. Always was weak-minded like her mother. Something snapped in Emma. She walked right up to her father's horse and looked him in the eye. "You want to talk about weakness? You're a drunk and a gambler who couldn't keep a job or support his family. You let Mama die because you spent the doctor money on cards. You sold your only daughter to buy more whiskey. I'm not weak for wanting better than that. You're weak for being the kind of man who would auction off his own child." Her father raised his hand to strike her. Jack was there in an instant, rifle barrel pressed against the man's chest. "Don't," Jack said softly. "Don't even think about it." The deputies drew their guns. The clearing erupted in tension, everyone armed, everyone ready to fight. "Enough," the older deputy barked. "Everyone calm down. Nobody's shooting anybody today." He looked at Emma. "Miss Carter, let me lay it out plain. Your father can't force you to go with him if you're of legal age and sound mind, but if you stay here with this man unmarried, your reputation will be ruined. You'll never be accepted in civilized society again." "I don't care about society," Emma said. "I care about being free." "There's another option," Jack said quietly. Everyone turned to look at him. He lowered his rifle and looked at Emma. "We could get married. Legal and binding. Then there'd be no question about your status or your safety." Emma's heart stopped. Jack's face was carefully neutral, but she could see the tension in his jaw, the uncertainty in his eyes. He was offering her protection, security, legitimacy, but was he offering anything more? "You don't have to do that," she whispered. "I know, but I want to." Jack's voice was steady. "These past weeks you've become important to me. I'm not good with words or feelings, but I know I don't want you to leave. If marriage is what it takes to keep you safe and free, then that's what we'll do." Emma's father laughed bitterly. "She'll never survive up here. She's too soft, too pampered. Give her a month and she'll be begging to come home. I've survived a bear attack, a premature goat birth, and the worst winter storm in 5 years," Emma said coldly. "I've learned to hunt, trap, and read Shakespeare by firelight. I'm stronger now than I ever was in town, and I have you to thank for that. You made me desperate enough to embrace a better life." She turned to Jack. "Yes, I'll marry you." Jack's eyes widened slightly, the only sign of his surprise. Then he nodded once, a quick dip of his chin. The younger deputy smiled. "Well, I'll be damned. A happy ending after all." "This isn't over," her father spat. "That marriage won't be legal without proper ceremony. Then we'll ride to town right now and make it legal," Jack said. "Deputy, would you be willing to escort us and serve as witness?" The older deputy nodded. Reckoned that would settle things once and for all. They rode to town in a strange procession. Emma sat in front of Jack on his horse, his arm around her waist like that first day. Her father rode behind with the deputies, cursing and muttering. The whole situation felt surreal. In town, the minister married them in a simple ceremony. Emma wore her everyday dress, still bearing patches from the mountain wear. Jack stood beside her in his buckskin, looking uncomfortable but determined. The words were spoken, the paper signed, and just like that, Emma Carter became Emma Morrison. Her father demanded the $50 back. Jack handed it over without argument. Consider it payment for not having to see your face again. Her father took the money and left, still cursing, still bitter. Emma watched him go and felt nothing but relief. They rode back to the mountains in silence. The sun was setting, painting the peaks in shades of gold and purple. Emma leaned back against Jack's chest, feeling his heartbeat, solid and steady. "Are you scared?" Jack asked quietly. Emma thought about it. "No." "Are you?" "Terrified?" Jack admitted. "I haven't let anyone close in 5 years. Don't know if I remember how." "We'll figure it out together," Emma said. "We've faced everything else together. This can't be harder than a bear." Jack laughed, a real laugh that Emma had never heard from him before. "You're probably right." Back at the cabin, they stood awkwardly in the doorway, suddenly aware of the change in their circumstances. They were married now. The loft and the fire weren't separate anymore. "I'll sleep down here until you're ready for things to change," Jack said. "No pressure, no expectations. We'll go at whatever pace feels right." Emma stepped closer to him, looking up into his scarred, weathered face. "Jack Morrison, you are the kindest man I've ever known, but you're also the most stubborn. We're married. We share a life now. That means we share everything, including the bed. I'm not afraid of you, and I'm not going to waste time pretending we're still strangers." Jack stared at her, something like wonder in his eyes. "You're sure?" "I've never been more sure of anything." That night they lay together in the cabin's single bed, fully clothed and careful of boundaries, but together. Jack's arm was around Emma's shoulders. Her head rested on his chest. They talked quietly about plans for the spring, about expanding the garden, and maybe getting a few sheep. "I never thought I'd have this again," Jack whispered. "A partner. Someone to build a life with." "Caroline would want you to be happy," Emma said gently. "I know, but for years I couldn't imagine being happy without her. Now I'm starting to realize that happiness isn't about replacing what you lost. It's about being brave enough to build something new." Emma tilted her head to look at him. "I was sold for a dairy cow, but I gained everything that matters. Freedom, purpose, and someone who sees me as more than property." Jack kissed her forehead, a gentle touch that promised more to come. "You saved me too, you know. I was just existing up here, surviving but not really living. You reminded me what it's like to care about something beyond just making it through another day." Outside, an owl called. The fire crackled softly. The mountains stood silent and eternal, sheltering them from the world below. Emma closed her eyes, feeling safe and warm and wanted. She thought about the girl on the auction block, terrified and hopeless. That girl was gone. In her place was a woman who'd learned to be strong, to survive, to love. Spring would bring new challenges. There would be hard days ahead, difficult seasons, moments of doubt, but they would face them together, two broken people who'd found wholeness in each other. Emma Morrison had been sold for a dairy cow at 18. But she'd bought herself freedom with courage and found love in the most unexpected place. The mountains had given her everything, and she would never take it for granted. Years later, when people asked how they met, Jack would smile his rare smile and say, "I bought her for $50 and a cow and got the best deal of my life." And Emma would laugh and add, "And I married a mountain man who saved me and became everything I never knew I needed." It was the truth. It was their truth, and it was enough.